Windows 3.1. The most famous piece of computer music from the 1990s wasn't on the radio. It was just 3¼ seconds long, played every time millions of people turned on their computers. And the man who composed it did it on a Mac. We'll get to that one in a minute, because before Windows had iconic startup music, it simply made noise. That changed with Windows 3.1 in 1992, which introduced Microsoft's first real startup sound, a short fanfare known as ta-da. Unlike later versions, it wasn't composed by a famous musician. It was created in-house at Microsoft using a Korg M1 synthesizer and its Brass 2 preset. The sound wasn't meant to be emotional. It was meant to show off. At the time, many PCs didn't even have proper audio, so hearing that cheerful chime meant your computer's sound system was actually working. Today, it sounds more like a game show jingle than an operating system. But in 1992, it sounded like the future. Windows 95. When Microsoft was preparing Windows 95, it wanted something that felt bigger than just a boot-up noise. So instead of asking an in-house engineer, it hired Brian Eno, the legendary ambient musician who had worked with U2, David Bowie, and Talking Heads. Then Microsoft gave him one of the strangest creative briefs ever. The company reportedly handed him a list of around 150 adjectives, including words like inspiring, optimistic, universal, futuristic, and emotional. There was just one catch. The entire piece had to fit into 3¼ seconds. Eno later said the limitation was actually liberating. He composed more than 80 different versions before choosing the one the world would eventually hear every time Windows 95 started. And here's the funniest part. He created it on a Mac, not a Windows PC. It's one of those stories that sounds made up, but Eno has confirmed it himself in interviews. Microsoft asked Brian Eno to fit 150 different emotions into just 3 seconds. Somehow, he actually did it. Windows 98. After the success of Windows 95, Microsoft didn't try to reinvent its startup sound. It simply made it warmer. For Windows 98, the startup chime was composed by Microsoft audio producer Ken Cato, who gave it a softer, more melodic feel than its predecessor. Instead of announcing that your computer had started, it felt more like it was welcoming you back. You could be in another room, hear those few notes, and immediately know someone just turned on a Windows 98 PC. It wasn't as legendary as Windows 95's chime, but it was arguably the friendliest startup sound Microsoft ever made. Windows 2000 and me. By the time Windows 2000 arrived, Microsoft had a different audience in mind. This wasn't about impressing families at home anymore. It was about offices, businesses, and professional workstations. The startup sound, composed by Stephen Ray Allen, reflected that shift. When Windows Me launched a few months later, Microsoft simply reused the exact same startup sound, which is probably the nicest thing anyone can say about Windows Me. The operating system became infamous for bugs, crashes, and instability, earning a reputation as one of Microsoft's least loved releases. Windows XP. If Windows 95 has the most famous startup sound, Windows XP has the most nostalgic. Composed by Bill Brown, a film and video game composer, XP's startup chime is about 6 seconds long, making it the longest and most orchestral of the classic Windows startup sounds. It launched alongside one of the best-selling operating systems ever made. So, for an entire generation, this became the sound of turning on a computer. It's also impossible to separate it from the iconic Bliss wallpaper. One greeted your ears, the other greeted your eyes. Together, they became two of the most recognizable pieces of media from the early 2000s, Windows Vista and 7. For Windows Vista, Microsoft once again turned to a music legend. This time it was Robert Fripp, the guitarist and founder of the progressive rock band King Crimson. The startup sound is built around a simple 4-note melody. The rhythm was created by Tucker Martin, while the harmony and final arrangement were completed by Steve Ball, a Microsoft manager who also happened to be a musician and knew Fripp personally. Here's the twist. When Microsoft 7 launched, Microsoft didn't create a new startup sound. It simply reused Vistas. which means the startup chime most people associate with Windows 7 is technically a Vista sound. It's a funny bit of history. Vista became one of Microsoft's most criticized operating systems, but its startup sound, and even parts of its visual design, lived on in Windows 7, one of the company's most beloved releases. Quick question: which Windows startup sound instantly takes you back? Let me know in the comments, and if you're enjoying the video, then don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel. Windows 8. After 20 years, Microsoft did something nobody expected. It removed the startup sound. Windows 8 was the first major version of Windows to boot silently by default, ending a tradition that had been around since Windows 3.1 in 1992. The reason wasn't that Microsoft suddenly hated startup sounds. According to former Windows UX director Jensen Harris, computers themselves had changed. Windows was moving toward ARM-powered devices like the Surface, where instant mobile-style booting was the goal. Interestingly, Microsoft didn't actually delete the startup sound. It simply disabled it by default. For 2 decades, turning on a Windows PC meant hearing a familiar melody. Then Windows 8 went silent. And most people barely noticed. Windows 11. After almost a decade of silence, Windows 11 brought the startup sound back. The new chime, called Pedals, was composed by Phi Bui, with contributions from Josh Kane and Savoy Schuler. The startup sound didn't return just because Microsoft wanted to make people nostalgic. It came back because people actually relied on it. Microsoft received feedback from users, including visually impaired people, who used the startup sound as confirmation that the computer had finished booting and was ready to use. Sound designer Matthew Bennett played a key role in bringing the startup sound back, helping make Windows a little more accessible for everyone. And that's every Windows startup sound, from the simple "ta-da" in 1992 to Brian Eno's iconic Windows 95 chime, Robert Fripp's 4 notes, years of silence, and finally the gentle return of Windows 11. The interesting part is that Microsoft kept asking world-class musicians the same question: how do you make a machine feel human in just a few seconds? And as computers evolved, so did the answer. Which Windows startup sound is your sound? XP, Windows 7? Or do you actually miss the silence of Windows 8? Let me know in the comments. And if this finally made the story behind these sounds make sense, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We break down confusing tech every week so you actually understand what you're using. Now here's the thing, every one of these sounds was tied to a version of Windows, but Windows is just one operating system in a much bigger family. Mac OS, Linux, Android, iOS, Chrome OS. Most people use several of them every single day without ever knowing where they came from, or that almost all of them quietly trace back to the same 1969 ancestor. That's exactly what we're covering next. Every operating system explained simply. Click the video on screen right now, and I'll see you there.